This approach that the tenure facility uses is one that we've learned over time. There are people in the key ecosystems where the forests thrive and survive, and those are the very communities, indigenous peoples, local communities that are key in tending and nurturing and in protecting those territories. So we basically shortcut the process of funds that are larger and much more flexible to give it to them directly. And to avoid all the bureaucracy of, these difficulties of trusting that they can manage those resources. And we've done that for now 5 years. And it's a large amount and flexible and continually being accounted for, at least $1 million a year, approximately $1 million a year, each year for 3 to 5 years. So it's direct groundbreaking. And with that is the whole package of building the strengths that they already have, but will be much better with some accompaniment that is tailored to the type that they can use. So that we call that in general capacity building, but that term really is accompanying them in the strengths that they're able to offer and ensuring that then they share that to each other. So one network in one country can share that to the different networks in the different countries in the region with the same language. And they actually begin to improve on those. When the sharing happens, there's a lot of creativity, there's a lot of inspiration, there's a lot of improving, that work. So that's key, because resources generally never get channeled with those amounts to them. Yeah. So that's really our model, and has been what has been requested of us initially in the consultations by the indigenous peoples and local communities. Yeah. Once they're in their territory, before, when they were isolated, there was really no one coming in challenging them. What are your rights over here? Get out of here. We're going to grab this. That wasn't there as much as it is now. So what's important is that there is a secure tenure for the communities to come to the table and say, hey, this is something that we need to protect. We protect it for purposes. You can protect it for your purposes, for ensuring that there is healthy soils and healthy climate and soil absorptive capacities for the aquifers, etc. They have shown, that with a tenure instrument we've seen and we've shown, and more research has shown as revealed to us now after this last 5 years, that with secure tenure, 3 to 4 times less deforestation in those territories. It's very prominent that works. It was harder to prove before because it was somewhat our theory, and we know it from experience, but now research has shown it too. Yeah. Well, I guess it has really been because that's where I grew up, in the places where there are forests and there are people, and there are indigenous peoples that are very prominent. I grew up myself growing up. And so what was key in all of these, and in that context at the time that I was growing up, was that when lands are grabbed, people get killed and they're defending it, and they get killed in the process, and it gets violent. And so I've seen it in many different angles. I was not directly under threat, but I had this resolve of saying, well, do we have to be at a level where we have to take up arms to do this, or are there better ways to do this? Is there a way that the law can kick in for this to be much more of a negotiated instead of a fought, space? So that was what became very prominent as a young person. I probably was so afraid to die in this process. I did not want this to be continuing to affect more and more people, not just friends and family, but a lot more people. So I thought this is the way in, is to study what is it in the laws, what in the land rights, in the land laws, the doctrines that earlier recognized these collective titles and these time immemorial possessions. And we found this out, especially in the context of the Philippines, during the time when it was under the United States government. The governance of indigenous territories was affirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court as, for as long as there is time immemorial possession, that these laws, these rights belong to the community. And you can then, with that, then you can measure the boundaries, you can basically title it, and you can come to the table talking with the others that are interested in the land for whatever resources that could be taken, and look at ways to do that more reasonably, sustainably, and also with benefits to the communities that own those land. So it's become prominent, even eminent domain. You need to pay the people that are in the land if you want to take it for public purposes. So for me, that was the key. And then I just then dove deep into indigenous people's land rights, and that became essentially so needed at that time. Even during 30 years ago, we were fighting huge deforestation challenges already. You can imagine now. And we realized that working with in the courts require legal standing, so mapped territories, and then also then climate, biodiversity, and all of these the interests that the nations, the states are drawn to commit to globally in the international arena can be translated coming back home in recognition in the laws and policies that recognize the communities that are partners in protecting nature. So partners in protecting biodiversity, partners in protecting forests, and this doesn't have to be always in this conflict and inequitable approaches. Yeah, it can be done more positively. So we've tried that. It's an experience. We've done it in the Philippines, and then I moved to Indonesia for professionally, and it became very, very useful there. And now moving to Sweden, addressing Asia, Africa, and Latin America, it remains so high in demand, and even more in demand to do this now. Yeah. And I say this without judgment in many ways, is that we have to balance our need to growth with our need to sustain ourselves and our resources. And often government is driven by the push to grow the GNP, to basically develop. And with that, then they push for exploitation of resources. That's one of the first ones that get hit. And when that happens, then those two interests collide. These are not just ordinary communities. These are actually, we're talking people who've lived over long periods of time, adapting, knowing the territory, tending to the forest, adjusting their ways, understanding those changes in season and land use that could contribute to a better decision making. Yes, direct funding is very essential, especially because of the need to know and respect that the people we're talking with are in the space, have experienced the challenges that not many of us have in terms of living within and around nature and within and around forests, and have organized themselves in a way that protects these resources and nature and forest, and also allows for sustainable harvesting for their survival, and has made priorities on the basis of those and of all the seasons and of how they've understood that. And they have relationships again so strongly. They're a community, they protect each other, they have relationships, they have all sorts of challenges, but over time, they've overcome those challenges. And the money that's needed for them to protect themselves and their territories have just trickled so little to them. And that's really because our mindset is that they do not know how to handle money, that they're just going to distribute it equally to their community members and not know how to report, right? And this we realized and we've discovered and experienced is really not true. So no other NGO, if they're not requested by the communities, should be daring to represent these needs without the community, being in having a seat at the table, understanding this. And there are some of our partners that are NGOs, but the community said, give it to them. We trust we can work with them. We know how to work with them, and we do not want the bureaucracy that we may not be able to handle every day of the reporting. And some of them would say, yes, we can handle this. You can help us. You can build the capacity within the organization. Give it to us. And the intention is not to give. I think over the time, so we've looked at this 1%. It's just that the bureaucracy has made it so difficult for that money to just come directly, and we're breaking that, because it's time to do it. Yeah, and we're seeing that those things we're protecting, accountability of money, effectiveness, efficiency, are still met. Just like many institutions that are self-governing over land and territory, there are ways that the tenure facility has learned in our work of channeling the resources for land tenure, that inclusion means information about really what is this about that we're talking about, especially for land. Yeah, our context is land and natural resources. So what is important for inclusion is the understanding of not just the leaders, or those that say they're representatives, but the processes that lead to not only the election of those leaders, but the sort of projection of what their visions are. So it's also the life plans. Some of the entry points for our work is understanding what is that about, how does that happen, who initiates it, where are the young people? Because traditionally, if you go to a village, for example, in a longhouse that's in Indonesian Borneo, it's a series of seasonal events that the community does together, and it's important that the inclusion process is understood in the context of this. Who are the actors? What areas do they have a control over? What are the rites of passage? What trust is needed, or confidence is already needed by young people to make those decisions, so that they are able to take over the leadership. The traditional way of doing this is very interesting. Not just interesting; it's something we can learn from, right? And so that's all of those are something we pay attention to very much. And so upholding the processes. So there's the selection of leaders. That's their governance, their sovereignty, and how do they actually do that, not just internally, but how do they monitor their territories? What decisions do they do in the process of that? Which other kind of governance units in the neighbors, territories, and how do they work together? Then ensuring these are very, really, if we follow them, it's very respectful. There are protocols, and there are automatic sort of interest in developing partnerships. So, and how are, because these are like interests coming together to secure territory and land and each other, right? So there are those partnerships. So this cannot actually be curated in a way from people coming in from the outside. And so this is our learning. Inclusive actually means actually learning about these relationships within the territories, and so important. And even they can teach us about this conversation, especially in the UN Permanent Forum, indigenous peoples, local communities. What exactly are these groups, and how what's the key term here? Self-determined. You can't just come into the group by being put in by a donor. so, so we're very careful about that. So those are for us, yeah, elements of inclusion. Yeah. Yeah. Besides funding, what's important is that that we tend to not see the indigenous peoples and local communities because they're invisible, right? They're not, they don't have the clubs and societies that many of us have to show up, the Rotaries, etc. So it's really important that that is put in national policies, and on the basis of what the Constitution says, that it respects everyone, the right to be recognized as the people, and that would be really important. Policy, legal framework, and yeah, respect for cultures. Yeah, because we're so diverse, and in fact, that's actually the strength of a nation, is the diversity of its people, and it's I think it's important that we know that as we do it, and in policy and law. Yeah, and I will say this from their perspective, and how they've taught me. The climate crisis is not it's not just a heating crisis. It's a crisis of lifestyle. It's a crisis of relationship with nature, and it's a crisis of respect for that. And in a way where you take only what you can use, and you leave the rest for others to use into the future generation. So the climate crisis, basically having indigenous knowledge inform us to return to those types of knowledge our ancestors, all of us, white or black or whatever color, have in co-surviving with nature. Somehow we have put ourselves in a place that is so safe that we can just basically buy everything from a store, but they all come from nature. So soil is key, and land use is key, and land is key for everything, including water, right? And forests are really key to ensuring the balance of our climate. It's our, it's our water cycle. Forest and land, and the moisture in land, and ability for that to be in the aquifers and rivers and seas and all of this. For indigenous knowledge that is sort of really there, you actually can still now experience this. If we go and visit our partners, it is very, very lived. Now, they don't take themselves away from the ecosystem. They are part of the ecosystem. Therefore, they take the risk, they give back, and it's very palpable. So for us, this is so important, especially even just the sector of land and land use, as a sector that climate is having to deal with right now. It's a connecting point, because it has not just the science, but it has the values of being related, or being connected to nature. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is progress, and it can, in some countries it's fast, in some countries it's slow, and I think the advantage now compared to before, 30 years ago when I started doing this work, is that the climate challenge and the biodiversity challenge have become very, very prominent in the international arena. And so there are agreements that bind governments. And so therefore, there are standards by which governments sign up to, and there are targets that they agree with. So that alone is really a big basically a big legal and policy advancement for progress. So the challenge now is to go to these governments and show them how to do this, because they may agree, their negotiators may agree when they come to the UN or wherever the negotiations are, but the translation of it is very much limited to not only policy but the implementation, the budget, and the expertise, right? And so this is where I think where the rubber hits the road. And so it's slow in the places where the governments do not immediately catch up because their people, their government trained experts are not as familiar. And in the places where they are familiar and they are trained and they are exposed, they are allies. They love working with our partners. That also in Colombia, the same in basically the forest, the upper reaches of the forests that are the space where the shamans live, and where our partners that are actively negotiating with the Colombian government report to those shamans in a very, very unique relationship of, this being spiritual and the other one being legal and political, right? But they are so intimately linked together. Yeah, so what gives me hope and inspiration is that there seems to be a point of urgency. Everybody understands. I believe there is a really urgent need to come together, but it seems that everybody understands that there's the 30 by 30, there's the net zero, all of these, they're already there. We're trying to really challenge ourselves to get there. And so what gives me hope is that the processes could be such that it can be designed to meet those targets. Once you begin to dream of an ideal situation, you actually figure out a way to get there. So we're in the process of, we've set up the dream, we agree these are this is the place we want to go, let's go, right? So it gives me that sense of great hope, and you need that. so we can't essentially handle the climate crisis as a people if we're in the middle of an intense disagreement all around, and conflict. That's just not going to get us to where we want to go. And everybody's in the same boat. So I guess everybody realizes that too. That's why some of them are trying to go to the other planets, but they haven't figured it out. So we're still in the same boat here in this blue marble. Yeah.